Coming up on The World Today, Donald Trump's impeachment trial set to begin next week in the U.S. Senate. Russia detains opposition figure Alexei Navalny's aides as planned protests go viral. Plus, coronavirus vaccine delays halts Pfizer-BioNTech jabs in parts of Europe. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin today in the United States, where, according to Democrats, Donald Trump's impeachment trial over his role in the deadly U.S. Capitol riot is poised to begin next week in the Senate. On Monday, the House of Representatives will deliver the impeachment charge to the Senate, triggering the trial process in the 100-member chamber. Republicans had argued for a delay, asking for more time to prepare. The House of Representatives last week charged former President Donald Trump with inciting a deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol, paving the way for a Senate trial. If convicted, he could be barred from future office. Our correspondent, Maria Bird, is in Washington, D.C. She joins us now for more. Maria, Trump's impeachment Senate trial is reportedly now poised to start next week, despite calls by Republicans to delay this to allow former President Trump prepare for his defense. Why are Democrats in such a hurry for a speedy trial?
Well, Tamila, it is a real, amazing thing to see how the U.S. has just pretty much changed overnight. And I think what's happening is the Senate and the House and Congress really wants to make sure that this does not get left in just the history books of the U.S. I think that they are concerned that if too much time goes by, that this will become something that will not be pressing for the Senate to take up. As we've talked about in the past, there's so many issues currently in the midst in the U.S. And so if any more time delays from this trial occurring, you might not ever see a trial come forth for former President Trump. And so I think they're just eager to ensure that this does get taken care of and that he is held accountable for what actually happened and really getting through this and past this time and moving into the future for the U.S.
So once the House delivers the impeachment article on Monday, talk us through the process. What happens next?
Once this occurs and they take it to the Senate, there will be further deliberations. They will overlook the actual case. The Senate will have a chance to review the case. The Senate will then be able to set up time for President Trump to come in and actually present his case to defend himself. And as you mentioned, at this time, Mr. McConnell has stated that he would like for President Trump to have time to get his defense together. And so obviously, President Trump will have to have his lawyers in place to be prepared to be able to respond to these allegations.
Mr. Trump left the White House on Wednesday morning and flew on Air Force One to his golf club in Palm Beach, Florida. With him off Twitter, he's been, mostly quiet. Any idea what he's been up to and his reactions to the past couple of days?
Well, one of the things we know is that he is definitely going to have to prepare himself, and he is very much aware of the impeachment documentations that he'll be needing to review. So he's preparing himself for what's next. I mean, I think that he knows what he's up against. We also know that obviously this has been a time where many have left his camp. But he has a few that are still surrounding him, and I think, really planning what his next steps will be. I don't think that the Trump family as a whole is looking to leave politics at all.
And just before I let you go, Maria, we've just heard not too long ago that President Joe Biden is set to take executive action to help people struggling with the economic toll of the coronavirus pandemic. What more can you tell us about that at the moment?
Well, at the moment, we know that there was an issue that existed with the stimulus checks. There was a check for $600 that was passed through. Obviously, we know that prior President Trump was looking to have $2,000. So we know that stimulus is a huge concern for this administration because of the fact that so many Americans are still sitting without a lot to be able to take care of their basic needs. So that is at the top top of the list of what they're trying to address is how to get more money into the pockets of the middle class Americans. We also know that they are looking to how to address some very urgent needs for small businesses because we've seen such a decrease in small business being able to stay afloat during these times. And we're constantly seeing the number of cases of coronavirus escalating, which means there's not a lot of hope for very soon that the US will be able to open up full fledged as it has been in the past. And I think the hopes were that by now we'd be able to see more of an opening of the country when really it's actually coming back and closing up even more.
All right, then, Maria, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the situation in the United States, and do have a lovely weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the Twitter account of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has posted what appears to be a call for an attack on Donald Trump in revenge for last year's killing of its top military commander. The post features a depiction of a man resembling the former U.S. president playing golf in the shadow of a warplane or large drone. It reads, "Vengeance is inevitable." The tweet from Ayatollah Khamenei's account refers to General Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated by a U.S. drone in Baghdad a year ago. Some Twitter users have called for the social media giant to suspend Ayatollah Khamenei's account. Twitter closed President Trump's hugely influential account earlier this month after he published posts that were widely considered to have encouraged violence that gripped the U.S. Capitol. Russian police have detained close aides of the jailed Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny, whose fans have flooded social media with calls to rally in support of him on Saturday. Moscow police say any unauthorized demonstrations and provocations will be immediately suppressed. More than 55 million people have watched his video about President Vladimir Putin's alleged luxury Black Sea palace. The Kremlin denies the property belongs to the president. Mr. Navalny was arrested last Sunday after he flew back to Moscow from Berlin, where he had been recovering from a near-fatal nerve agent attack in Russia last August. On his return, he was immediately taken into custody and found guilty of violating parole conditions. He says it is a trumped-up case designed to silence him. Now, VOA correspondent Charles Mains is in Moscow, where he joins us live to bring us up to speed. Charles, authorities have rounded up several Navalny allies. What do we know about those who have been detained so far?
That's right. In fact, not just, it's been several dozen, in fact, across Russia. Navalny has a widespread network through his anti-corruption foundation, which he's been running now for several years. Many have been detained, others certainly threatened with detention should they go to this rally. Among those in Moscow is key staff. We've seen several lieutenants of Navalny's, including his lawyer, Luba Sobol, threatened with a $250,000 fine. We've seen also his press spokeswoman sentenced to 9 days in jail, as well as other members serving short jail terms. And again, this is all designed essentially as a warning to other Russians who Navalny has called out to come out on the streets tomorrow to protest both his arrest and to call for an end of the government of Vladimir Putin.
How effective has this move by authorities been in halting this planned weekend protest? Police say they would crack down on any demonstrations in support of Navalny. Is this protest still likely to go ahead at this point?
Well, first of all, I should note it's illegal in the eyes of the government, not only because of for political reasons, which they say it's not an agreed. You have a system here where you need to agree with the government if you're going to launch a protest, but also because of the virus, the coronavirus. There are certainly concerns with that as well. Now, as far as how effective these warnings about a tough police crackdown, as they say, immediately will be suppressed. These protesters, should they come on the streets tomorrow, we just simply don't know. We've seen a lot of activity on social media of people talking about coming out. Certainly a big interest among younger Russians, Navalny's base in some ways, who've taken certainly his messages to heart, including some of his investigations into corruption inside the Kremlin. The most recent one, of course, targeting Vladimir Putin himself. It shows a palace of Vladimir Putin's, an alleged palace that belongs to Vladimir Putin. So, we'll have to see how much people really are willing to risk, both themselves politically and with the possibility of some kind of jail time, perhaps. And the fact that there's also a pandemic going on.
You know, Charles, it is interesting that this latest development comes after Navalny on Tuesday published a corruption investigation into a lavish $1.35 billion property on Russia's Black Sea coast that he alleged was owned by President Putin. What are authorities saying about these allegations?
Well, they deny that palace belongs to Putin, although they're not making clear who it belongs to. But I think the more important point here is just how personal. This seems like the next chapter in this kind of evolving struggle between President Putin and Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader. For a long time, the Kremlin had this argument that Mr. Navalny didn't matter. He was, quote, just a blogger. Nobody paid attention to him. Well, now we've seen an attempt on his life, which Mr. Navalny says was backed by President Putin. And of course, the Kremlin denies. It's important to point out. But also, we see this kind of a personalization of an escalation of their kind of dual relationship, if you will. You know, Mr. Navalny's in, for the first time, not in a holding cell, but in a real prison for 30 days. A court quickly sentenced him upon arrival here in Moscow earlier this week. Also, this attack, you know, Mr. Navalny for years has been launching investigations that really went around President Putin. He was talking, there were investigations into corruption and extreme wealth among Mr. Putin's friends. Well, this time it's actually making those allegations directly at the president himself. So there seems to be a kind of a personal escalation here that we're seeing.
But really, what happens next? Give us an update on Navalny himself. We know, like you mentioned, he was arrested last Sunday after he flew back to Moscow from Berlin. What's happening now?
Well, he's in a central Moscow prison. It's a prison, in other words, not a holding cell as sometimes he's been before. He's certainly been arrested many times over the years, but this time it's a prison for convicted criminals. He is there. He actually posted through his lawyer a post to social media today. Usually, you know, kind of in his trademark sense of humor, his sense of irony. He said, "Look, I'm doing okay. I'm not planning to hang myself or commit suicide." He thanked people for their willingness to thank people for watching this investigation, said he was worried that maybe it wouldn't find an audience. But in fact, as you noted in your intro, it's found 55 million people at this point who've watched this YouTube investigation, and thanked also younger Russians, students who've been trading these messages on TikTok. So, you know, Navalny is cut off in some ways. He won't be out, or certainly won't hear from him now until mid-February, but he's been managing to communicate through his lawyers over the last few days that he's been in prison so far.
All right, then, VOA correspondent Charles Mains, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the White House says U.S. President Joe Biden will seek a 5-year extension to the New START arms control treaty with Russia in one of the first major foreign policy decisions of the new administration ahead of the treaty's expiration in early February. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki also adds that the president tasked the U.S. intelligence community for its full assessment of the SolarWinds cyber breach, Russian interference in the 2020 election, Russia's use of chemical weapons against opposition leader Alexei Navalny, and alleged bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan.
The United States intends to seek a 5-year extension of New START as the treaty permits. The president has long been clear that the New START treaty is in the national security interests of the United States. And this extension makes even more sense when the relationship with Russia is adversarial, as it is at this time. New START is the only remaining treaty constraining Russian nuclear forces and is an anchor of strategic stability between our two countries. And to the other part of your question, even as we work with Russia to advance U.S. interests, so too we work to hold Russia to account for its reckless and adversarial actions. And to this end, the president is also issuing a tasking to the intelligence community for its full assessment of the SolarWinds cyber breach, Russian interference in the 2020 election, its use of chemical weapons against opposition leader Alexei Navalny, and the alleged bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan.
Vaccinations in parts of Europe are being held up and in some cases halted because of a cut in deliveries of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Germany's most populous state and several regions in Italy have suspended first jabs, while vaccinations for medics in Madrid have been stopped too. The U.S. pharmaceutical firm has had to cut deliveries temporarily, while cases in many European countries surge. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Frustration is mounting on Europe over reduced shipments of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, while the United States pharmaceutical company increases production capacity at its Belgian plant. EU governments say it's costing critical time during the early stages of the rollout to care homes and hospital personnel. Italy and Poland have threatened to take legal action in response to the reduction in vaccines. Meanwhile, Hungary has signed a deal to buy 2 million doses of Russia's Sputnik V COVID vaccine, the first EU country to do so. The agreement comes days after Hungary's drug regulator gave approval for use of Britain's AstraZeneca and Russia's Sputnik V vaccines against the virus, as Budapest strives to lift coronavirus lockdown measures to boost the economy. The EU's medicines regulator has yet to approve the Russian or AstraZeneca vaccine. Meanwhile, President Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey says China has approved delivery of a second consignment of the CoronaVac vaccine, and 10 million doses could arrive in Turkey by this weekend. Turkey has already received an initial consignment of 3 million doses of the vaccine produced by Sinovac, and has so far vaccinated more than 1.17 million people, mostly health workers and elderly people. According to local media reports, Hong Kong looks set to put tens of thousands of its residents in a lockdown to contain a new outbreak of the virus. It will also be the first such measure the city has taken since the pandemic began last year. The measure will target 2 districts which cover a small but densely populated part of the city. Authorities in Beijing, in the meantime, have ordered more coronavirus tests for about 2 million people in its downtown area after 2 new cases were reported in the Chinese capital.
Well, over in Portugal, the head of the Private Hospital Association says after a record surge in COVID-19 cases, the country is running out of hospital beds across the public and private sectors. The country of 10 million people, which fared better than others in the first wave of the pandemic, now has the world's highest 7-day rolling average of new cases. Schools were closed today for the first time since March, as spiraling coronavirus cases forced the government to step up its response to the pandemic. Portugal has been in lockdown since January 15, with non-essential businesses closed and most people confined to their homes. Well, with their lives hanging in the balance, nurses at the Milton Keynes University Hospital had a proposition for COVID-19 patients, Elizabeth Kerr and fiancé Simon O'Brien, that they want to get married on the ward while they still had the chance. Here's the decision.
Consider getting married within hospital, even though it wasn't ideal.
Words no young couple should ever have to hear. But for Elizabeth Kerr and her fiancé, Simon O'Brien, it was the stark reality of their situation. Both contracted COVID-19 in early January, and days after their positive test, their oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. They were rushed to the Milton Keynes University Hospital in the same ambulance, then placed on separate wards full of COVID patients.
Ambulance. We both went in the same ambulance.
Kerr told medics she planned to tie the knot in June, but that was looking more unlikely after O'Brien's health further deteriorated.
The respiratory nurses came to see me on the other ward and told me that Simon was going into intensive care. They couldn't delay it, and because we talked to them about, that we're getting married, and we were, and then they were sort of saying to us, well, do you want to get married in the hospital? This might be your only chance. And those are words I never ever want to hear again.
Hospital staff scrambled to make things possible for the young couple. They secured a license, and nurse Hannah Gannon acted as a witness, as well as documenting the evidence for their friends and family. Moments after saying "I do," O'Brien was sedated and spent the night on mechanical ventilation. With mortality rates now as high as 80% in Britain's ICUs, a happily ever after was far from certain.
So it's been incredibly challenging, and I know, there have certainly been moments where you've questioned, do we stay within nursing? Is this the correct thing to do? But then you experience something like the wedding, and you think, absolutely, if there is anything we can do, even if it's not necessarily deemed as a nursing task, but if it's something on a very human and holistic level that we can deliver to the patients, then it gives you faith to sort of carry on, and it just keeps you going a little bit longer.
Simon is now out of ICU and has been reunited with Elizabeth on a COVID ward.
It is, absolutely. I was dying to get back to see Lizzie back on this ward, so I tried my best and really fought for my breath back to come back down again, and I did, and here we are now.
Both are still receiving oxygen, but things are looking up. Elizabeth says the terrifying experience of fighting for every breath has made them realise what really matters: spending time with the people you love.
We're wishing them a speedy recovery and happy married life. And finally, on the program, Saudi Arabia has opened its first drive-in movie theatre in Riyadh to allow viewers to enjoy watching a movie while taking the necessary precautionary measures against the spread of COVID-19. The movie theatre can accommodate up to 150 cars while applying social distancing measures, wherein masks and checking temperatures are compulsory. Drive-in cinemas popped in other parts of the Middle East since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, with similar venues opening in Dubai and Beirut earlier last year.
Usually down here.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shubowale. Have a lovely weekend.